Thank you so much for coming by. This is amazing.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I'm quadruple stoked after seeing your assortment of interesting items in your house.
Ooh, I don't. Only
We're
you
probably
heard
the
that.
only ones that hear
We're the
that.
only ones
Yeah,
that
they
hear-
don't hear that. That's cool.
That never happens. They're like, oh, I have a friend.
And now they're like curious, like, what
yeah,
did we
what
hear that they
happened?
didn't get to
Yeah.
hear? And like there was like a person screaming next door. It's all good.
Right? And how both of us just got silent and we're like, nobody heard that.
It's actually in her closet. She stuck someone in the infrared sauna and she's not gonna let them out.
It was a scratch combined with a scream, but that's all right. Oh my god, so much fun. Skip and I met at A-Fest. Actually, we met pre-A-Fest at the airport. Skip is one of the first A-Festers I met. For those of you who don't remember, I had like one group of friends before May/June, and then after May/June, almost every guest on Quit Happens has been an A-Fester, or at least like every other one. And because A-Fest is just a community of awesome people that get quitting, essentially. Like to get where you are in your life, that you're an entrepreneur or you're doing your jam and you've made a lot of shifts, like you have to have accepted the strategic quitting mindset and put it to work for you. And it's just a very cool thing for me that you guys are also willing to talk about. So thanks for coming on by.
Amazing.
So Skip and I discussed nothing about his quits before. Well, okay, next to nothing about his quits beforehand. I know just very general things, but Skip is a ridiculously interesting character and a good storyteller. He's a vlogger, and so like he tells stories for a living. So I'm just gonna let you tell us a story. Where would you like to start? What kind of quitting experience have you had that you find would be valuable for the listeners?
You know, it's funny, the way that you introed it completely shifted the story that I wanted to share that I think will benefit them the most. So I grew up in Minnesota, right? And I've done so many amazing things. I've run a marathon, I've herniated 5 discs in my spine. That's how I got into the whole PT side of things, right? I was the youngest specialist in MAT, muscle activation techniques out of Denver, Colorado.
I know what that is. It's amazing.
So a bunch of those really interesting things. At the same time, like I had never traveled before. I went to Barcelona last year for Mind Valley University.
Whoa.
And then I did 30 countries since I went to Mind Valley University because of the people that I met, like the A-Festers, right?
Wow.
You meet this type of crowd, they're so interesting, right? I was one of the original people that started Keto OS Prove It.
Really?
Yeah, so we didn't talk about that yet, but
Kept
it was
that
funny.
under wraps. I
Yeah,
like it.
yeah, we'll talk. Right, I worked with the U.S. Olympic team, the Taiwan Olympic team, lots of CEOs. That tends to be my favorite crowd because I'm just not big enough to work on athletes on a regular basis.
And you mean physical therapy wise?
Sort
Correct.
of. I created
Oh.
my whole own thing. That's really interesting.
Does it have a name?
It does, but we'll
Yeah,
talk
we'll
about
get to
that
that.
later because
All
we'll
right.
intro that.
Fair enough. Right.
Lots of really interesting things. Now, you know, I've been doing this vlogging thing, and it was so fascinating that when I started vlogging, I just wanted to show people what living like a really happy life could look like, but I wanted to show them all parts of it. So there were parts where I was sad, there were parts where I was happy, and when I first started vlogging, I had never really done anything professional video before. And those vlogs from Barcelona got like 4 million views.
Wow.
And so because of that, I was like, oh man, like there's so much more I want to share and show to people. And I started this group called the Avengers, like my personal friend circle. And now it's become this huge like thing in my life where there's 9 of them in San Diego right now, which is why I'm here. There were 13 in Estonia.
Oh.
There were 10 in Iceland. And just in New Zealand, we're gonna have 18 at this big retreat in Queenstown. And it's like not a paid thing, it's just like my friends thing. It's really cool. But if we back up from so much of that to like how these accomplishments happened and why I think anyone accomplishes anything, which is some kind of ambition or drive that gets put in you at some point in your life. And I remember when I was growing up in Minnesota, my mom and dad worked minimum wage jobs. One worked during the day, one worked during the night. And my brother and I were the only 2 siblings. And they would drop us off at daycare during the day while one of them could sleep, and then the other one would come get us, take care of us a little bit, and then they would sleep. It was just crazy. At the time, I thought it was totally normal.
Yeah, you don't know
right?
anything else.
Yeah, it's absolutely relative, right? And we had like happy family time, and I had lots of friends. And I remember like Christmas, right? We would show up, and my uncle was the bomb. There'd be this giant like cardboard box, and he would hide all like 13 gifts he would have gotten. And they were like little things, but because it was such a process, you know those little like, what are those called? the little things that you pack in boxes that go
Oh, like
everywhere.
the packing peanuts?
Like packing peanuts, right? And there would be like 10,000 packing peanuts, and you're just ripping through them trying to find your gifts and whatnot. And so we had all these great memories. And then I remember one time, actually, it was a couch not too dissimilar to this. And we had a couch here, and we had a couch there, and like a glass table in the middle. And I remember, like, I'm 6 years old. Yeah, 6. My brother is like 7 or 8. He's about a year and a half older. And then my grandfather, who was like a very important father figure to me, my dad and my mom on either side of him. And they sat us down, and they were just like, you guys are about to move. And we were like, oh, okay, where are we going? And they're like, well, we're not all going.
Oh.
It's just you, your dad, and your brother. And you're going to move to Louisiana, to New Orleans, to live with your grandmother. And so I'm like 6 years old. I'm like, I don't really understand what this means.
Yeah.
I see it, everyone's crying, and I'm like, what's going on? Even my brother could understand at that time, but I was just like, what's happening? And then a week later, I remember this big yellow truck pulls up into the driveway, and we get in the yellow truck, but it's just my dad, my brother, and I, and then my grandpa, my mom, my uncle, his girlfriend at the time, who's now his wife, and some other people were at the house, and they were like waving goodbye as the truck started up. And I just remember like running up to my grandpa, and you know, as a child, right?
Yeah.
Your grandfather is like the ultimate. And I was just like, you know, like, I don't want to leave. Can you just like do your grandpa thing and like fix this?
Aww.
Right? And I can only imagine, like, as a grandfather, you see your grandkid and what that must feel like to know you can't do anything about it. And so we moved to Louisiana. My dad, my brother, and I slept in one bed for I think about a year, while my dad had no job and was like learning skills to try to get a better job. And then as we progressed throughout life, my dad got like a little bit better of a job and a little bit better of a job, and then he was like, hey, do you want to move to Houston? And I got repeatedly jumped in Louisiana because it was just like such a interesting school area, right? And it was my brother and I from like the north, right, the Midwest. It was not a good situation. My brother was in all the smart kid classes, so he was fine. I was getting held up on my neck from my friends, right? It was a sketchy situation. So he's like, do you want to move to Houston? I was like, yes, please. And my brother was like, no, I don't want to move. I'm like, please take me, get me out of here, right? We moved to Houston. I make some friends. We move. Life goes on. And it wasn't until I think like 8 months ago where I called my mom and my dad, and I was like, thank you so much for getting divorced at such a young age. For one main reason. So many of my friends I've noticed have had these incredibly deep relationships with people that they probably shouldn't have been in relationships in to begin with. And I was wondering, like, how could it, from the very beginning of like, let's say 3-6 months in, right after the honeymoon phase of the relationship beginning, there's so many issues in these relationships or in these work, in their careers, right? So many issues with their bosses, but they would just stick through it. And I started to think, like, why do I always fight for the best situation? And I realized at 6 years old, they showed me that you don't have to fight through things, even if they're not working. You can just make a change. Yes. And you can try to seek something better. And they both got remarried to people that fit them way better. Wow. And they both, like my stepdad, my stepmom, are both super amazing people. Wow. And they're so much more similar on each end than my parents were. And so I called them to thank them for showing me that. Yes. So that now, like, I have had some of the most incredible romantic partners of all my friends. They're always like, how do you find these beautiful, amazing, intelligent women? I'm like, because that's my standard. Exactly. It's like my expectation of life, right? Because my parents showed me. And on the flip side of that, my dad getting this divorce, taking his sons and like being put up against a wall, showed me like, oh, you can completely change. He went from minimum wage to well over 6 figures by like today now. And so I've seen that progression. And so it's been really cool to just know that things can change if you just work at it and you put time in and you want it to change. And that's where this whole story ties back around to ambition. And so I've done all these things because I saw from 6 years old, the most intense moments of your life can be such a huge blessing. And it was for them, and it has been for my brother and I, to see that. And now it's like, I'm so grateful for that horrific experience at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I would say I was quitting anything, so many people look at like the divorces of their childhood, of their family problems as such a bad thing. And like 7, 8 months ago, I was like, I had never really thought it was a bad thing, but I was like, I'm gonna quit that mindset and be like so much gratitude for what had happened. And now I saw like the real, and I connected the dots of like, this is why I'm like the way I am.
Wow.
I seek the best for myself because of that example they set.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I often say, you know, in the divorce, I've never been married, so I can't say what exactly it's like to have a divorce, especially not with children. But if you're going through that, oh, what will this do to the children? Think about what not doing it will do to the children. You know, like watching parents fight for 20 years is not the example you want to set. What does that tell them? That tells them settling is okay. Fight through things that are terrible for you. Don't make the most out of your life. You know, you made this decision, you're stuck with it. And it sets up a view of love that is kind of paralyzing for the rest of their life. Like to them, love isn't safe, love isn't happy, love is just something you suffer through. That's not a model that you want to pass on to your kids. So that's so beautiful that you told your parents, like, thank you for giving me this, for not settling, giving me a model that settling is not the way to go, even if it looks rough at the time. Oh, that's so good. Because quitting ain't easy. It isn't. If it were, I wouldn't like have this show or a book or anything, and people would just be like, I'm out, you know, but it's a struggle, and your dad showed you can start from the ground up, and that's, as a young boy, I'm sure that was really meaningful to be like, man, if I ever have to struggle, I've got this example of like, it's possible. Your life is what you make of it, and you've gone about making that. So in the few minutes that Skip and I, because we didn't get a chance to talk a ton in Sardinia because Skip was filming things. Is it still called filming? Do the kids call it filming these days, even though it's video? Okay. He was around filming all the stuff for the Mind Valley vlog / daily recap. So we got to chat just moments before we started, and I heard like 17 things that you've done in your life, like the physical therapist, and you worked at Lifetime Fitness, right? Were there any quits in there that took a little bit more gumption than others, more fears that you had to overcome, or more logistics you had to prepare?
All of them. So one thing you didn't hear just before, which led to all of that, to Lifetime, to those things. When I was 18 years old, I had $1,000 from graduation of high school, right? All the money to my name. And I took 600 of those dollars to go attend a leadership camp by this coach named Eric Bostic. He was like a youth leadership, inspiration, transformation speaker. And he had these camps in the summer. And I wanted to go be a camp coach because he would take middle school and high school kids from like the border of Mexico and Texas. I was growing up in Texas,
yeah.
Right? We moved to Houston. And he would take these kids, they would come in, they were like bad kids, right? Like some of them had gang history, a lot of them had, I mean, it was really the worst of the worst, and they were getting sponsored by different programs and schools to come in. And there would be like 300 to 500, like I wasn't as much of a numbers guy back then, but there was a lot of them. And then like between 40 and 50 coaches. And it was some of the most transformative experiences of my life, having this camp coaching experience. And I ended up being like the lead coach of all these coaches at 18 years old. And I spent, 60% of all of the money in the world on this thing. And I remember at the end of the first camp, it was like 5 or 6 days, I was like in the auditorium, the last kid leaves the auditorium, and like these kids came in hard, right? Like hard kids. And they left crying and hugging everyone.
Wow.
Every time there was a camp. And it was amazing. And I remember the last kid leaves in the auditorium, and I just went like this, and there's a picture of me literally passed out on the steps of the auditorium because I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't slept for this whole week, right? But it was incredible. I have so many stories about it. And then a couple days later, Eric, the speaker that I paid to go to this camp, called me. He's like, wow, I just want to thank you for coming. And I was like, dude, this guy calls all of us? Wow. That's so insane, right? And then I realized he doesn't call everyone because he was like, can you come to camp next week? And I was like, and inside I'm like, I don't have the money. Like, I can't pay for camp again. And he was like, oh, and it's on me. Like, if you just make it there, like, I've got get you like a dorm, because we were staying in college dorm rooms at this campus, right? The college campus. And I show up, we do the camp again. It's totally incredible. It's even better than the one the week before. And I was like, man, this is amazing. And I'm passed out, right? And he calls me again, like 2 days later after I get back. He's like, Skip, I want to hire you. And I was like, for what? I want you to just show up at my events. And I was like, and do what? He's like, just be there. I just love your energy.
Aww.
And I was like, whoa, that's insane. And that started this relationship that we had for like a year and a half, where I would go to events, he'd ask me for help with stuff, and I would just be there. And just being there, I would like help with gear, help move things, be the coach, like all this different stuff. I have so many fun stories about that time. The result was, after this year and a half, I was 19 years old, and he sat me down or called me at some point, and he was like, I want to hire you on full time to travel with me and help me with everything, and I want to apprentice you and teach you how to do this too, so that you can start telling stories from stage, you can help me even more, and we can eventually maybe have like your own events and own show, right? Wow. And I was like, wow. And at the time, I didn't really realize how successful he was on his own. He was doing super well, like $250,000 to $500,000 by himself a year. Wow. It was just like insane for a speaker. Dude was just a hustler, right? And he used to be a high school education teacher. So it was a huge, huge growth. And so this was like my start into extreme personal development, was like, I was working with this guy. Yeah. And so he offers me this gig. He's like, I'm gonna apprentice you. And I was like, dude, like that is my dream. This is absolutely what I want to do. And I have to say no.
Ooh.
And I was like,
suspense.
And I didn't know why. It was like, it was such a heart thing, but it was in the moment. Like I didn't have to think about it. This just came out of a 19-year-old's body. And I look back on it, I'm like, so much wisdom in this moment. And I said, I absolutely want to do this. This is my dream. I will do this. But if I do it right now, I'm going to be telling all of your stories, because I don't have any. Like you get on stage and you have all these moments and experiences you can talk about, and I don't have that yet. And I really want to have that. And so I think like, while this is what I want, I need to go out in the world and get those stories. Like I'm just going to spend the next 10 years, it's been 9, getting crazy stories that I can talk about and be able to share that, and then do what you're doing.
Wow. What was his reaction?
We didn't talk for a long time.
You took it personally?
I'm not, I was so young back then that I think I was like, literally after I said it, I was like sweating and shaking, and like, why did that just come out of me, right? Like, this is my dream. I love this guy. Yeah. And I love everything he's doing, and all the stuff we've done together has been transformational for so many people. And like, this is the life that I want. But I knew somewhere deep down there needed to be something different. And so, yeah, I think he was upset for a while. And then maybe like 5 or 6 years later, he had been kind of watching my journey, because social media has been so beneficial in that way. And I was like, hey, like I'm going to be in Texas. I lived there for 11 months. I moved back for 11 months. And I was like, let's hang. Let me help you with something. And he was like, would love you to do that. I showed up. I helped him out. It was really cool. It was very distant. We weren't as close as we always were. And then maybe like 6 months ago, I called him out of the blue. And like, we're definitely going to be building something together soon.
Oh, that's very cool. Oh, you're right. That is a lot of wisdom for a 19-year-old who was like handed their dream on a platter. Mm-hmm. Like, But I like how sometimes the universe steps in and you're like, where did that even come from? But it's like this higher knowledge. It's like, look, this is what you're going to say. You're going to thank me later.
Absolutely.
It's going to sound crazy now. And often people ask me about things that I quit back in like my early 20s. And they always say, do you have any regrets? Now, I will tell you my answer to that later. But were you ever, in the past 9 years, were you ever at a point that you regretted that decision? Or how, like, did you ever, like, what's the conversation you've had about that? Because I can imagine, like, if you're handed this opportunity on a platter, if there's ever a hard time somewhere in those 9 years, there could be the chance for you to look back like, oh, if I had only said yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a huge, like the story that's been in my head, I think in my moments of doubt, in my moments of worry, in like the dark points of my life, I've never wanted to say yes to that moment. I've always known it was right to say no to that, and what I did. But there were points where I've gone back and forth of like, was that really my intuition talking back then, or was that my fear talking when I said no to him?
Yeah.
And so in my moments of doubt, that's been the conversation of like, you know, like questioning, like, what does intuition really feel like? And I think we all go through this to some extent, right? We're like, oh, that's how I feel. And you're like, but is that like my past trauma feeling that? Or is this me feeling that?
Yeah.
And I don't think we know the answer until you know the answer, right? Like if you have a question about it, you don't know the answer yet.
Yeah.
And then at some point, right, like everything is 2020 in hindsight.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Often I think the difference for me sometimes is my head telling it or is my body telling it? You know, like the fears generally live in the head. The actual like what's good for me is usually when the gut is talking. That somehow it's not black and white, obviously, like that, but if I'm, like people often ask me, how do you know if you should quit a thing because it's bad for you, or how do you know if you're just being lazy? I get that question frequently, and it's very cute. I don't know, I just think, because I just picture this person getting up to work, getting up to train for a marathon. They know, like they plan to train for a marathon, they get up in the morning and they think, oh man, do I have to like run again today? Oh, it's a little cold outside, but you drag yourself out, you do it. That's one situation. If you quit because like, oh, I don't want to get out of bed, that's one thing. The other thing is the marathon training has put a struggle on your marriage, has made you late for work several times, and every time you think about putting on your shoes, you start to get like sick to your stomach. That's a different situation. That like marathon training is not working for you. That's not you being lazy. That's just wrong thing, wrong time. And to me, that's the difference between your head telling you I don't want to get out of bed and then your stomach being like, oh, I can't handle this anymore. And I'm so irritable at my significant other, So in your story, I love so many things about this. Like you were able to go back, you preserved the relationship. You were able to say, it's not you, it's me. Like even though whether or not he took it well at the time, you said for my own ability to tell stories, I need to do this. And that's the best way to leave any kind of work situation is let's put the onus on me. It's not me. He knew this. You had just handed him he had just handed you the greatest opportunity. So you beautifully, and this is a great example of the other person still may not take it that great at the time, but you've lived in your integrity and like they're going to come back in the future realizing like you had to do what you had if they're the right fit for you. If you're with us in a situation and they never come back, that just isn't the right person for you. Like they have self-selected themselves out of your circle of influence and your circle of friends, This is
a big thing that I talk about a lot when it comes to mindset and just general happiness, because I think it's so important for everyone on earth to be 100% selfish. Because if you're 100% selfish and you're like actually filled up inside, you're actually happy with decisions you're making, you'll so often find yourself helping other people. Whereas if you have like that resentment, if you have that regret, if you have things like that, you'll so often find yourself being like, well, like I want to get her a cup of coffee, but I'm not going to because I did that thing for her last week and she never paid me back. And so like, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, no, I want to do it.
Yes.
Like I want to give you that cup of coffee so that you smile and then I'm on your good side, get brownie points. That may never amount to anything, but I feel good about it.
Yes.
Right? It's a selfish act. And to the same extent, I encourage people to look at every decision they make as a selfish act. Like, what do you really want out of the situation?
Yeah.
You're not going to do anything that you don't want deep down. So then it's just a perspective switch, right?
Yeah.
So like me coming here, is that helping you or is that for me, right? It's totally for me. I have no idea what I'm going to get. Just little roll the dice into the unknown of like, it's going to spark some interesting topic or some person who hears this or listens to this, like one person is going to be like, wow, I really need to call my parents, or
yes.
I really need to like say no to this golden opportunity because it's not the right time and that's how I feel, but my mind has been talking me into saying yes. My heart has been trying to scream at me and say no.
Yes.
Whether it's a relationship, a trip, right? A career, could be like no to the Pop-Tart that someone's holding right now while they're listening to this and they're like, I know they're both biohackers, but I really just want a Pop-Tart to enjoy this episode because it's been so entertaining.
I love that. Yeah, if you want to quit the voice in your head that would punish you for a Pop-Tart for a minute, you can quit that voice in your head for a minute.
Absolutely.
You cannot biohack. You can biohack yourself sicker if you are too strict. I've been there. I quit biohacking myself sicker. That was one of my quits in 2016. I spent all day, every day, Ben Greenfield's site, what's the newest thing? I tried keto, I tried the keto lifestyle. I had my face in the paleo cookbook. Like every second I was trying to like imbibe information. And then finally I was gaining weight like crazy because of the cortisol from the stress and because I was eating the wrong things because I was like, one person would tell me to eat this. Okay, I would try that. Then they would tell me, and I was changing every 30 seconds. And the anxiety from not knowing which was the right way, it was just a disaster. I remember the day I finally quit and put it in somebody else's hands. I said, I'm going to quit making my own food choices. That's a big thing for like a doctor / biohacker to give over. But I said, I have to make this quit. Like biohacking currently is making me sicker. And this woman gave me a diet. I got a food delivery service, lost 10 pounds, stopped being anxious all the time. Like it was amazing. So it's those, like you said, those shifts about what you think is right and wrong for you at the time and changing your mindset about things. Those are huge. And like you just pointed out, such valuable information for people out there who are contemplating a divorce and feeling guilty about it. If they hear nothing else out of this, hear that like your future children or your current children, or say you don't have a kid but like the rest of society, will probably thank you for it, because when you are in the wrong relationship, it affects everything else, everyone else. You know, I was a Bernie Sanders delegate, as you probably can tell by the Bernie thing on the wall. But everybody's like, why do you love Bernie? And I'm like, well, a lot of things that he's fighting for would take care of a lot of the reasons that people are angry. People are angry because they're stuck in a job they don't like, because they have to stay there because of health insurance, or because they have to stay there because they have such extreme debt. And those are or student loan debt. And those are two things he was trying to change. And same thing with relationships. You're in the wrong relationship. You're going to go to work, be mad at your coworkers because you weren't happy at home. Then on the way home, you're going to road rage. You know, and then you're going to get home and then you're going to make your spouse's day unhappy because you both are just feeding off each other. Like, who's benefiting in this world besides the little part of you that wants to feel like you didn't fail in a marriage? Look at the comparison to like how much harm you're doing collectively because you won't quit a thing that's not working. So thank you for like offering that freedom to people and that change in perspective. It's super valuable. In your journey, any other fears that you've come across that you think you had a unique way of looking at, maybe that people could get some benefit out of?
You know, it's interesting that this whole format of like podcasts, right, where it's like asking questions and it's clearly like interview style, where it's like, I have so many questions for you, and I feel like it's specifically like we could go back and forth on this for like a while, and it would probably, there's so many people dealing with this. Like if I had heard myself tell that story a year and a half ago, it could have dramatically improved my life. But it took me through a failed relationship, I think it was 3 years, about a 3-year relationship, 3.5, something like that. Right before Barcelona, like as Barcelona started, basically, I got out of a relationship. And the fear was that, it's actually this really interesting quote: growth comes from change, happiness comes from acceptance.
Ooh.
And so, I mean, I could break that down for a day, right? And I think a lot of us have different thoughts and perspectives to come from, but if you want to be happy, you have to accept Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, right? Like, dude can be cool in Auschwitz. That's a whole nother level of like happiness comes from acceptance.
Yeah.
From acceptance of where you are, from the lack of the comparison game.
Yes.
Right?
Ooh, yes.
There's a huge thing in our lives right now of like, if you're not happy, it's because you don't want to be.
Yeah. It is definitely a loving what is thing. Like the story you're telling yourself has so much more to do with your happiness. I was telling somebody on a podcast yesterday, I got this scar on my face from getting the skin cancer thing taken off. And I was like, I can either look like, man, I'm so upset that I had this skin cancer and I got this scar, or I can look at the fact that now that I see the scar, I put on more sunscreen and I'm not going to have like a massive skin cancer somewhere else. You know, there are two ways to look at everything. And it's upon us to like do the work and find the mental stability and the tools to be able to take that, the mindset of gratitude. And that's a big help on the path to accepting things, I believe.
There's so many tangents I want to take this on. Very, very quick one. Would this couch mean as much to you if you didn't have the story to go with it?
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. For everybody out there, and Skip, I didn't even tell you the best part of this. My mom comes to visit me in town. She comes about once a year from the Midwest. And it's a big deal for her because, like, San Diego is much more beautiful than where we're from. No offense, O'Fallon, Illinois, but like there's a beach and less corn. And she came out to visit me, and at the time I was living in Venice. This is for the short period I lived in Venice, and I had this couch that I bought when I got to San Diego. So it was about 5 years old, but it just looked beat down. And my mom was like, I'd really like to buy you a new couch. And, you know, she's not made of money. This was like her hard-earned, you know, somewhere that, you know, she's digging out this money to, like, she wanted to help me with a couch. And that meant so much to me. And I was like, no, like, don't spend your money on my couch. I can buy a couch, but she wanted to. And, like, gift giving to her is, like, her greatest pleasure. And so I was like, sure, Mom, we'll get a couch. We go to the store. We find this couch, which seems way out of a price range that I would ever allow my mother to pay for a thing for. You know, I think it was like $1,100. I was like, no, Mom, you're not spending $1,100. But I was telling Skip ahead of time that I happened to, you know, be talking to the salesperson, and they're like, yeah, well, if you can find a competitor selling it cheaper, you know, we'll honor that. And I went on my phone and I Googled the couch number, and I found somebody in Wisconsin selling it for $400, thinking there was no way that they would honor that. And they did. And so my mom got to buy me this super, like, those of you watching this on YouTube, like, you can pull the sides back and it reclines and it's super nice. And so for me, it's like, this couch has way more of a story. I'm never giving this couch away. Like, my mom would have to come by and insist that I give away this couch for me to get another one.
And so to the same extent, I think that especially as humans, like, develop, and as we get more, if you want to call it conscious or just generally more mature, when people have scars like that, like, I didn't even notice you had that scar until you mentioned it, but now it makes me appreciate you so much more for having the story behind it. Because, like, if you were just perfect, like, that's just, you know, it's like, when you go to, like, the park, right, and all the trees are beautiful, but this one tree looks super crazy, and it grew, and it was, like, anchored to the side, and it's this beautiful picture at sunset, and you're like, wow, this is just an amazing moment, right? Because this one tree was different than the 7,000 other trees at the park.
Yeah. Imperfect is interesting.
Very.
Yeah, perfect is just, it's aesthetically pleasing for a moment, but that's it. Like, there's nothing, like, nothing makes you curious about it. You're like, oh, well, you came out perfect. Okay, moving on to the next thing. Skip, if there is a question that you feel will be valuable that you want to ask me, feel free. If not, you can wrap up with whatever, like, last piece of information you'd like to impart. The big dream is to destigmatize quitting. Like, quitting has a bad name, it's gotten a bad rap, but like I say so often, if you don't want to call it quitting, if you're hung up with that, call it pivoting, call it evolving, call it transforming, whatever you want to call it. But the fact of the matter is, you're going to have to quit doing one thing and start doing another. That's what a pivot is. You quit going one direction and you start going another direction. And so many people just kind of gloss over that in the personal transformation space. There are, what, 1 million books written that say live your best life, and very, very few, because I promise I researched this, that tell you how to quit the life that wasn't working for you. And for a lot of people, that's the pain point. You know, like, okay, go find your best relationship. Well, I'm stuck in this one. I'm married to this person, and what do I do now? Like, I gotta prepare my finances, and there's all these fears. What are people gonna think if I do? Like, who addresses that? That's such an integral part, but it's just not that fun to talk about. Like, that's the painful part. And so people just, okay, let's go into the best life. But my goal with this podcast is twofold: to show people out there that everybody, no matter how famous or infamous or just the rest of us, has a quitting story, and probably somewhere in there we're all the same fears that you're having in your quit right now. It's one of those, just, I want everybody to feel connected. Like, just because you're Oprah doesn't mean you don't have a quitting story, that you were afraid of quitting a thing, you know? Second thing I want to get out of it is everybody who's gone through these quits and is on the other side. And by the way, on the other side, they're gonna have another quit the next day. Life is a series of quits, you know? They say they've made a big divorce or a big job quit, whatever their quit is, and they found some techniques to get through it. I just want to pass those on. Like, I had Dominic Quartuccio, who you know from AFES. I had him come on, and this was so valuable, because so many people are just like, I know this job isn't for me, but I don't know what to do next. And Dominic had great advice for that. And that's what I want to get out of this. By the way, so you don't have to like scroll back and find Dominic's episode. The advice was like, just do what you love for like 6 months after, work. Like, you give yourself a quit day, but spend that whole time doing what you love, and then start to see, where did these all fall? And for him, it all fell into like, oh, every night I'm going to some different personal development thing. Maybe I should become a speaker, coach. You don't have to like search for your passion. It will probably find you if you just do you and be for a while, And those are the kinds of things that I would love people to get out of this show. 3 things. Quitting is awesome, totally necessary, part of life. 2, we all have the same fears when we face our quits. And 3, here, like, let's share, let's like crowdsource the knowledge of how to get through these quits in the best way possible.
And then selfishly, what do you want out of this?
Selfishly, there are 2 things in the world that light me up. 1 is dancing. No, 3. 1 is dancing. 2 is singing and playing the bass and percussion. And 3 is talking about quitting. And so for me to like get to talk about quitting, I could do this all day long. Like in some other podcast, somebody's like, what lights you up? And I was like, can't you tell? I'm like all over the place. It was on video. And I was like, this is my jam. I could talk about this all day. And for me, everything I have done, like even just today, I was fixing a snack and it like hit me like a lightning bolt. You were asking me, do I do anything with the law degree that I have? Rarely. Like we have this upcoming 1 lawsuit, and I taught law for 2 semesters, but on a day-to-day basis, I don't use it. But then I thought back, and this whole quitting thing started when I gave my law school, like valedictorian speech graduation thing, and I did it on quitting. And that's what started this, my whole mindset of like even thinking about spreading the gospel of quitting. And so it's like, even if law school was only just to get me to that graduation and give me that speech, and then lead me to this whole new life, like I'm so thankful for being here makes me thankful for every trial and tribulation, because now it can be part of helping somebody else. Skip is snapping.
Amazing.
Skip,
Amazing.
That was fun. That was super fun. Nobody ever asked me a question. But so dear Quit Happens. You probably heard that in the pilot if any of you were there 40 plus episodes ago. But I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to say it again, because that is absolutely what I hope for with this podcast. And thank you for being part of it.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Thank you.
Absolutely. And for everyone else out there, until next time, happy quitting.